The day America was dragged into the World War II. December 7, 1941, a peaceful morning at a U.S. naval base. The sun was rising over the Pacific Ocean. Sailors were having breakfast. Officers were beginning their daily routines. Nobody knows that, within minutes, this quiet morning would become one of the most shocking moments in the modern history. Inside a battleship, a young African-American Navy cook, named Dorie Miller, was doing his normal duties. He had already served breakfast to the officers. Now he was collecting laundry from different sections of the ship. But at exactly 7:57 a.m., everything was changed. A terrifying alarm echoed across the naval base. A sound no soldier ever wanted to hear. Doris rushed outside, and what he saw changed his life forever. The sky was filled with hundreds of Japanese aircraft, bombers, fighter planes, torpedo planes. They were flying directly toward the American fleet. Within seconds, the peaceful labor turned into chaos. Explosions shocked the ground. Ships caught fire. Smoke covered the sky. The Japanese Empire had launched a surprise attack on the Pearl Harbor. But why did Japan attack on the United States? How did a country like Japan dare to challenge one of the most powerful nations on earth? And how did a simple Navy cook become an American hero and receives one of the country's highest military awards? This is the story of the attack that changed the world forever. The story begins in 1941, during the darkest years of the World War II. The war had already been raging from the years. On one side were Germany and Italy, led by Adolf Hitler and his allies. On the other side were Britain, France, and the Netherlands and their partners. But one major power was still staying away from the conflict: the United States. After the destruction and loss of the World War I, America wanted to remain neutral. The country did not want to get involved in another massive event happening in the Europe and Asia. But there was one nation that continued to worry American leaders: Japan. Japan had limited natural resources. It lacked important materials like oil, which was essential for its military and industries. To solve this problem, Japan began exploring its empire. It invaded and occupied parts of Asia, Korea, Taiwan, large areas of China, and it started looking toward Southwest Asia. Japan wanted to control resource-rich nations like Indonesia and Malaysia. But their areas were controlled by the European powers. Malaysia was controlled by Britain, Indonesia belongs to the Netherlands, and the Philippines was controlled by the United States. Japan's expansion created fear among Western countries because behind Japan's suggestions was alliance with the Nazis' Germany, a country that was already fighting against Britain and threatening the global stability. In July 1941, America decided to take the action. The United States stopped exporting oil to Japan. And this was the devastating decision, because around 80% of the Japanese oil supply came from America. The United States gave Japan one condition: leave China and stop military expansion. Then oil supplies could be resumed. For Japan, this was an impossible choice. If they withdraw from China, they feared losing their image as a powerful empire, but without oil, their military would eventually become useless. Japanese leader decided not to retreat. Instead, they created a dangerous plan. They would collapse resource-rich territories in the Southwest Asia. But there was one major obstacle: the Philippines. Because the Philippines was controlled by America, Japan knew that attacking the Philippines would be an American response, and that response would come from the one place: the Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor was America's most important naval base in the Pacific. Japanese understood that if it wanted to expand across Asia, it had to eliminate the American fleet first. So Japanese military leader created a bold plan: a surprise attack that would destroy America's Pacific forces before the United States could react. Japanese began secretly preparing for its fleet. The attack force included 6 aircraft carriers, hundreds of fighter planes and bombers, submarines, destroyers, battleships. Thousands of Japanese sailors traveled across the Pacific Ocean. Their destination, Pearl Harbor. Meanwhile, the American had a powerful force stationed here. 8 battleships, hundreds of aircraft, numerous sport ships. On paper, America had enough strength to defend itself, but there was one problem. They had no idea the attack was coming. Japanese wanted complete secrecy. The fleet avoided communication that could reveal their location. After traveling thousands of kilometers across the ocean, the Japanese attack force moved closer and closer. Only about 370 kilometers away from the Pearl Harbor, the final order was given. Prepare for launch. The largest surprise attack in American history was about to begin. The actual Pearl Harbor attack minutes by minute, December 7, 1941, a date that would be remembered forever. At exactly 7:55 a.m., the first wave of the Japanese aircraft reached the Pearl Harbor. More than 350 Japanese planes suddenly approached above the American naval base. For the soldiers below, it was almost impossible to understand what was happening. A peaceful morning had transformed into a nightmare. The first bombs fell. Explosions ripped through the harbor. Japanese aircraft targeted American battleships one after another. The goal was simple: destroy America's Pacific fleet before it could fight back. The battleship sitting in the harbor became easy targets. Fire spread across the water, smoke filled the sky. The sounds of the explosions echoed throughout the entire base. Within minutes, one of America's strongest naval force was under attack. The first Japanese attack was continued for nearly 45 minutes. Then, suddenly the planes disappeared. For a moment, some Americans believed their attack was over, but it was only the beginning. 10 minutes later, a second wave arrived, more bombers, more explosions, and more destruction. For almost 1 hour and 15 minutes, Pearl Harbor faced one of the most devastating attacks in the military history. When the Japanese aircraft finally left, the damage was unimaginable. Several American ships had been destroyed. 8 battleships were damaged, hundreds of aircraft were destroyed on the ground. Thousands of American soldiers and sailors were killed or wounded. The harbor that once represented American strength had become a scene of destruction. But among the Chows, one man refused to surrender. The man was Dorie Miller, the same Navy cook we saw at the beginning of this story. When the attack began, Miller was collecting laundry on his battleship. Then he heard the alarm. Moments later, the Japanese torpedo struck the ship. The explosions injured many sailors, including the senior officials. The ship was collapsing into chaos, but Dorie did something extraordinary. Even though he was not trained as a combat soldier, he rushed into the danger. He helped move injured sailors to safer location. Then he went toward an anti-aircraft machine gun. Without formal training, he began fighting the Japanese aircraft attacking the ship. He continued fighting until the attack ended. According to the reports, he helped save wounded crew members and showed incredible courage under the extreme conditions. His action turned him into a symbol of the bravery. Later, Dorie Miller received the Navy Cross, one of the highest rewards in the United States Navy. For a young African-American sailor living during a time of racial discrimination, this achievement was historic. He proved that courage has no color, no background, and no rank. But the attack on Pearl Harbor created a consequence the Japanese did not fully expect. They wanted to weaken Americans. Instead, they awakened the sleeping giant before the Pearl Harbor attack. The United States had avoided entering the World War II, but after this attack, everything changed. The very next day, America officially declared war on the Japans. The United States had entered the World War II, and now the conflict had become a global war involving one of the world's strongest industrial powers. After the attack, America spent months rebuilding its naval strength. Fortunately, the United States' many damaged ships were located in the shallow water. some could be repaired and returned to the service. America began preparing its response. And the response came only a few months later. In April 1942, the United States launched its first major air attack against Japan. The target was Tokyo. American bombers flew over the Japanese capital and dropped explosives. It was not as destructive as Pearl Harbor, but it sent a powerful message. America was now in the war, and it was coming back. The following years became a brutal battle between Japan and United States. The Pacific Ocean became a battlefield. Island after island became the center of the fighting. American forces slowly pushed closer towards Japan, and Japan became weaker. Its resources were running out. Its military was struggling. But surrender was not an option for Japanese leaders. They continued fighting, even when the defeat seemed unavoidable. The war had reached a point where both sides knew something extreme would decide the final outcome. And then, America developed a weapon, while anything the world would have ever seen. A weapon powerful enough to destroy an entire city in seconds. A weapon that would damage warfare forever. The atomic bomb. By the summer of 1945, the war between Japan and United States has entered its final and most destructive stage. Japan was already weakened. Its cities were being bombed. Its military powers were declining. Its economy was collapsing, but Japanese leaders still refused to surrender. For America, the question was becoming more difficult. Now, could they force Japan to end the war? A traditional invasion of Japan could cost hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of lives. American officials feared that a direct invasion would create one of the bloodiest battles in the human history. Then they turned toward a weapon that had never been used before, a weapon created through years of the secret research, the atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, at around 8:15 in the morning, the United States B-29 bomber named Enola Gay flew over the Japanese city of Hiroshima. Inside the aircraft was a bomb with the code name Little Boy. It weighed approximately 44 kilograms. The aircraft released the bomb. For 43 seconds, it fell through the sky. Then the world witnessed the first nuclear explosion used in the warfare. A massive flash of the light covered the city. A powerful shock wave destroyed buildings within seconds. A giant fireball rose into the sky. Temperature near the explosion reached thousands of degrees Celsius. The city of Hiroshima was devastated. Thousands of people died instantly. Many more would later suffer from burns, injuries, and radiation effects. It was the first time humanity had witnessed the destructive power of the nuclear weapon. But Japan did not still surrender immediately. Only 3 days later, on August 9, 1945, America dropped another atomic bomb. This time, the target was the city of Nagasaki. The bomb was called Fat Man. It was even more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. Another Japanese city was destroyed. Thousands of lives were lost. The world had entered a new age, the nuclear age. After the second atomic bombing, Japanese finally escaped that continuing the war was impossible. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito announced Japanese surrender. World War II was coming to an end, a conflict that had lasted 6 years, a war that had involved dozens of nations, a war that had changed the map of the world forever. But the decisions to use the atomic bombs remains one of the history's biggest debates. Some historians argue that the bombing forced Japan to surrender quickly and prevented an even deadlier invasion. Others argue that the destruction of the civilization areas caused unimaginable suffering and changed the world forever. Regardless of the debate, the fact remains the atomic bomb showed humanity that it had created a weapon capable of destroying itself. The story that began on a quiet morning at Pearl Harbor ended up with the most powerful explosion humanity had ever created. Japanese wanted to eliminate America's power from the surprise attack, but instead Pearl Harbor, the United States, and brought it fully into the World War II. A single day changed the direction of the history. A Navy cook named Dorie Miller became a symbol of courage. A naval base became the starting point of the America's greatest war effort, and a few weapons changed the future of the warfare forever. The lesson of the Pearl Harbor is not only about the battles, ships, or weapons. It is about how one decision can change the fate of the millions of people. History is often shaped in our moments: a single morning, a single attack, and a single choice. And December 7, 1941, became one of those moments that World War never forget. Like this video and subscribe this channel for more these incredible facts.